This is a Learn recording for Lesson Classical Antiquity. Our learning goals for this lesson and for the recording is I can identify the importance of Aristotle, Archimedes, and Antiquity. The timeline in history that we will be considering for most of this lesson is 2200 BC to 200 BC. Gifted minds see further than normal. Scientific discovery has always begun with someone saying, that's funny, I didn't expect that to happen. Or that's different, I wonder why. Can you picture a time in your own life when you said something similar, something like that, and your curiosity was sparked? Let's take a look at the timeline that includes 2200 BC to 200 BC. Physical science began when people looked around and observed that there were certain consistencies. Roughly 2,500 years ago, two Greeks, Aristotle and Archimedes, made discoveries because they were curious about why certain things in their world behaved as they did. People saw regularities, such as the sunrise and sunset, seasons of the year, and the movement of stars in the sky. Once they started paying attention to these observations, people began to be able to predict events in their lives. Enheduanna, 2354 BC, was a Sumerian astronomer. Enheduanna represents the first in a long line of women who followed the stars. They improved their world and ours. Enheduanna was the first scientist to monitor the movement of the stars and moon. Aristotle, 384 to 322 BC, was a Greek philosopher. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher who founded the science of logic. Aristotle defined the philosophy of nature as the study of things that change. Aristotle was the founder of the scientific method we practice today. Archimedes lived between 287 and 212 BC. Archimedes was a noted mathematician who developed important theories on buoyancy and leverage. He devised Archimedes' principle to determine what King Herod II's crown was made up of. He discovered the Archimedes screw. He developed a weapon known as the ship shaker, seen in the picture on the right. What is Archimedes' principle? As Archimedes climbed into his bathtub, he noticed the water rising as his body entered the water. This is known as water displacement. The Archimedes principle is a scientific law which explains why some objects sink and some objects float. What is an example of Archimedes' principle in your life? One example could be when you are taking a bath, you cannot fill the bathtub to the top, or when you get in, it will overflow. What was the king's challenge to Archimedes? To determine what his crown was made up of. He used water displacement and buoyancy to investigate the king's crown and determined that it was not pure gold. He found that the crown displaced more water than the lump of gold of equal weight. This meant that the crown was not pure gold and that the goldsmith had mixed silver into the crown to cheat the king. Although scientific inquiry spread into the Mediterranean following Greek discoveries, a bleak period ensued during the 5th century, after the fall of the Roman Empire. The Dark Ages descended on Europe when barbarians rendered almost total destruction as they swept through. People focused on surviving instead of philosophizing, and there were no advancements in science in Europe for several hundred years. Advancements in technology, mathematics, medicine, and astronomy were achieved in China, Arabia, and India, but not in Europe. Practice question. What is one idea that Aristotle is responsible for? Pause the video and determine your answer. The scientific method. Aristotle was responsible for developing the scientific method we use today. What were scientific advancements being made during the Dark Ages? Or, excuse me, where were scientific advancements being made during the Dark Ages? That would be China. During the Dark Ages in Europe, there were no scientific advancements. The United States was not present and around as a country at this time in history. When were the Dark Ages? The Dark Ages were the 5th century. They began in the 5th century and continued for several hundred years after the fall of the Roman Empire, when the barbarians swept across Europe. What was Anna the first scientist to do? She was the first scientist to study the stars and the moon. We have now covered Aristotle, Archimedes, Anna, and the period known as Classical Antiquity, and we have now reached our learning goal. We can now identify the importance of Aristotle, Archimedes, and Anna.